Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories like these. Now, let's get into today's story video. Ada for refusing to watch my sister's stepkid and exposing her lies to her husband. My female 21-year-old sister Jess, a 30-year-old lady, is married and has a 5-year-old stepson, and she is the youngest of 3 sisters. Her husband is a full-time employee, although she is employed as a som. For the last several weeks, she has called my mother at 9 a.m. every Monday to request that she come over to her house and babysit her stepchild for a few hours. I live at home with my parents, so I've been seeing this pattern for a while. My mother had left town last week to visit relatives, and my sister called me around 9 a.m. yesterday, Monday, to beg me to come babysit her stepchild for a few hours since she needed to get something done quickly. It was obvious that it wasn't necessary or urgent since I had to go to study, and she did this every Monday. So it was obvious that it wasn't, but she insisted it was. So I said sorry but no. She brought the talk to a close, and I continued on to the university. After a few hours, I got a phone call from my brother-in-law, who questioned as to the location of my sister, to which I responded that I had no idea what had happened. He then went on to explain that he had just arrived home at 1 p.m. and found his child alone in the house when he approached me. The fact that my sister had left her stepchild alone so that she could travel anywhere she wished took me by surprise. His reaction when I told him about my conversation with her was explosive. Towards the end of the evening, my sister came over and started yelling at me for abandoning her after she contacted me to claim she was already out of the home in order to compel me to babysit her stepson. Despite the fact that I was unaware of the Facebook message until she told me of it, she alleges that I did it on purpose and that it also exposed her to her husband, who had assumed she would be at home with the kid. That's not all. When she married, I told him that her mother came over every Monday morning to watch the kid for a few hours, which resulted in a massive fight between him and my sister. My wife screamed at me, accusing me of being petty and selfish, and that I was merely stirring up trouble and caused issues in her marriage by tattletelling on her husband. To avoid arguing any longer, I stepped into my room and turned on the music in my room. My father and others held me responsible for not supporting my sister and for leading her and her husband to argue with one another. Ada? Okay, so I saw that a handful of questions were asked repeatedly, so I'll just write the answers here for everyone to view and benefit from. My sister and brother-in-law laws has died away. My sister constantly calls my mother to beg her to come over and babysit her stepson, but my brother-in-law is usually at work when she calls. It seems that most of you are curious about where my sister goes every Monday, and I've even had someone accuse me of being YTA for not knowing. However, I don't know anything, and I have no idea what is going on with my sister, and I assumed it was none of my concern. Update, gentlemen. I've decided to investigate what's actually going on with Jess. I'm not the sort to spy, and it's not my business, but she's already turned the family against me because of something she did. NGL, I came here expecting toast, but I was mistaken, which is a nice thing. I'll provide an update as soon as feasible. Thanks. Story 2. Ada for asking to take the son I gave up on vacation with me. In any case, I, a 26-year-old girl, was compelled to write this after reading another story that seemed quite similar to my own situation. I had a kid named Alex when I was 19, and he is now 7 years old. I had him when I was 19 years old. When he was a baby, I had no emotional connection with him, and despite the fact that I adored him, my life had been wrecked, and his would be as well. In addition to failing grades and being unable to work, I was unable to pay a babysitter. After I died, Alex was entrusted to my mother and stepfather, who reared him as if he were their own. My mother and stepfather took on the role of grandparents, and despite the fact that I wasn't there for Alex when he was a baby, he recognizes me as his mother, which I am glad for my mother's permission to do. Fortunately, my parents are technologically savvy, so I was able to communicate with him through FaceTime every evening. My grades were good, and I graduated with honors. I have a rewarding work, and I am in a relationship that I hope will lead to marriage in the near future. I am grateful that my boyfriend, Jock 30M, recognizes how important Alex is to me in spite of the fact that he does not live with me and is not being raised by me. My parents continue to maintain custody of Alex, but he has started to spend 1 weekend a month at my place. We do, however, FaceTime every morning after school and at night to keep in touch. Jack surprised me with airline tickets to join into his cabin in Ontario for a week, which I was delighted to accept. Affectionately known as Jacques, Alex is a man that Jacques wants to get to know better. Jacques is impressed by Alex's brilliance and feels he will be able to place him in the local private school where he works as a teacher in the future. In spite of the fact that Alex thinks he's wonderful, I'll accept that he doesn't really know him. I realize I will never be able to make Jacques love me, but if he didn't appreciate my child, even if I wasn't the one who raised him, I would never be with him again. However, I do not believe I will be able to be married unless Alex agrees. So I asked Jacques if he would be willing to purchase a third ticket so that Alex could accompany us, and he agreed instantly and without hesitation, despite the fact that it would be an additional expense. Due to the fact that Alex would be out of school for the next 2 weeks, I called my mother and stepfather to see if it would be possible for me to take him on a vacation after Christmas. My mom didn't seem to be overjoyed by the prospect. When I inquired, my stepfather responded furiously that he, my mother, and Alex already had plans for that week and did not want to cancel them, and that he was unhappy and insulted that I inquired without first realizing that they had anything planned. He became angry and offended. He told me to go think out what my priorities were before phoning them back. I did so. In the aftermath of that conversation, I spoke with a friend whom I like for her candor, and she told me that it was a silly question to ask since I hadn't paid enough attention to Alex to see that he and my parents may be up to anything. Since then, I've been feeling guilty about it since I don't want to take my parents for granted anymore. My friend called me in a hole, which was something I told Jacques, and he said I wasn't wrong to ask since I wasn't demanding anything, and that my buddy was wrong to call me in a hole, but I'm not convinced. Update. I was going to apologize to my parents in person after posting, but my stepfather came over instead. He brought me to the ice cream store where he used to take me when I was too little to speak. In our conversation, I utilized several of your suggestions. He apologized for making the remark about my priorities and admitted he was mistaken. He told me he was proud of how far I'd come, that I'm the light of his life, and that he'd always be there for me. He informed me that he and his mother were afraid I'd attempt to take custody of Alex now that I'm finally ready to be a mother, and that if that's what I want, he'll back me. I told him I only want what's best for Alex, but my biggest fear is that he'll grow up thinking I didn't love him, and I want him involved with me and Jacques because he's the most important thing to me, and I don't feel like I can get married or have more children unless he's okay with it because he's my baby. We promised to figure it out once Jacques and I returned from the cabin. When he dropped me off, he gave me a huge embrace and a kiss on the cheek. That was the last time I saw my stepfather. He died of a major heart attack while we were at the cabin. That's not something I like typing. I returned to live with my mother and Alex because I don't want my mother to be lonely or Alex to feel abandoned. Since then, I've gotten to be more of a parent, cooking all of Alex's meals, sending him off, picking him up, helping with schoolwork, putting him to sleep, and snuggling with him. Everything that